Welcome back to another episode of Soul Coffee, everybody. I got Dr. Danielle Cornelius with me here at our home studio. Four-time now veteran of the Soul Coffee podcast. As super excited as really being able to appreciate the work that she does and that she's debuting to the world, being a gyno-chiro and a hybridization of chiropractic, women's health, as I've previously introduced her as a women's health chiropractor, as she was the office manager at our space. She was previously into somatics or root somatics as her hybridization of being able to really piece together the importance of regulating the nervous system, but being able to highlight a lot of the byproducts of stress, of trauma, of energy work that gets locked up in the female body, especially in the pelvic floor work, as there's so many symptoms of lack of fertility, of incontinence, of that a lot of symptoms that a lot of women have thought to be normal or thought to be common. And the work that she's doing now in this new space is so exciting to highlight, because I've learned so much from holding space as a man, as a leader, as a chiropractor, as a doctor. And she's been, once more, a mentor in all ways, shapes, and form, as we've traversed the ability to hold paradox. We've traversed the energetics of fertility, and we've traversed how the feminine is the medicine that is most needed at this time. I believe episodes 28, 25, and 51. But without further ado, please, y'all, welcome once more to the podcast, Dr. Danielle Cornelius.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always my pleasure to be here, and I love this new studio. It's gorgeous.
Oh, nice. That feels good. Tell me, Dr. Danielle, what are you most excited about when it comes to debuting your work in this way, which has never been seen before in healthcare?
Yeah, I'm really excited because I feel like most healthcare systems, I feel like has kind of neglected the female body. Most of our health science was built on male physiology, and exercise science was all built on male physiology. And so women have been kind of treated like we're small men, but our bodies are distinctly different, and we go through lots of different types of issues. I think we talked about this before. Most like autoimmune type issues, or those kinds of issues that like we were kind of taught in school, like we really don't know how to like solve these things, like migraine headaches and different types of autoimmune issues are usually around 70% female. So there's something like dysregulating in the female body. And a lot of the solutions, like in Western medicine, are pretty hardcore. And sometimes they can be helpful, but a lot of times there's this whole gamut of what we can do with body work. And my passion has always been working with fascia. And like when I was in school, I was in chiropractic school between like 2004, 5, and then 2009. And I remember in anatomy class, our gross anatomy teacher was like, oh, fascia doesn't really do anything. And in that moment, I was like, I don't believe you. And I just became obsessed with fascia. I work a lot in the pelvis with women, internally and externally with the fascia, to help like unwind some of these bigger patterns that are happening. And I'm just really excited that I've finally been able to, after 13 years of practice, put together a training program for other chiropractors to learn this work, because it's still very obscure. Like people haven't heard about it. And even after doing it for this long, I'll still run into people that are like, you do what? That's so weird. So it's my mission now to just make it really commonplace and normal to go to bodywork for issues like incontinence, like painful periods, like cysts and uterine fibroids and things like that, which bodywork doesn't necessarily fix directly, but like the tension that happens when your fascia is locked up, and once you start to release it, it helps with blood flow. It just helps with more energy flow, and it really helps your nervous system reset. If your pelvic floor is locked up, your whole nervous system is going to be like in state of fight or flight. So I'm passionate about bringing fascial work, which is really gentle, and I think it's the feminine piece that was forgotten within chiropractic too, because even chiropractic adjustments, as wonderful as they can be, are really masculine and not always what women need all the time. And so, yeah, that's what I'm excited about, bringing fascial work to chiropractic.
I imagine there's been a big softening in your awareness of chiropractic, as you highlighted, your professor said, this is really important. You're like, I don't really.
Yeah. I think you're wrong. Turns out I'm right.
Right.
And there's been a lot of studies. I just did a big literature review just to prepare for my training program. And there are so many studies that have come out even in the last 5 years that completely and utterly validate all the work that I'm doing, which is always nice. Like I don't always need, because I can feel you, like we do body work, you can feel what people need. So you don't always need the empirical evidence, but it's really nice when it comes through.
Yeah. Share a little bit more on that. What did you find?
There's a ton of evidence now that really proves that our emotional patterns get stuck on our fascia. And like when your fascia is stuck, it's going to impact your hormone health. So we have a direct correlation, a direct link between what's happening with your fascia and how it's affecting your hormonal makeup. So if there's a hormonal imbalance, sometimes it literally is coming from fascial tension. And when you learn to unwind it, especially if there's a lot of fascial tension, like around the ovaries produce a lot of the hormones that we need for healthy function. And if they can't function and they can't move in the way they're supposed to move, they don't get the blood flow that they need. They don't get the nerve flow that they need. They don't function as well. And when you clear out that congestion from that area, it can help regulate periods again. It can help regulate a lot of hormonal issues.
I mean, it makes so much sense, as I think it's important with the softness and with the slowness, with the crafting of your space that, you've had with Samia. It's just so welcoming, as it's like a nice little den for people to be able to come home to, for people to unravel. As when it comes to a lot of this work, I just think of trauma, as you put me on to Waking the Tiger, as we've talked about in previous episodes, which has been so important to be able to understand, because women can hold so much energy here.
Yeah.
And when you mention hormone disruption, I think as though at least over half of the new patient exams with women that I do got something going on with their thyroid. They have something going on with their low back. They have something going on with their hips. They have something going on with their pelvic floor. Between those four, that's definitely 70 to 80% of that. And imagine a part of that is due to trauma and women not feeling as though that they have a space to be able to melt into, to surrender into. And is that something that you really encountered when you were going through graduate school, and that was a byproduct of how you were in the corporate world?
Yeah.
But then you got into medicine in that way, and then you've, like, your whole life journey has been this work, really.
Yeah, that's true. And I probably could write a book on all of that.
Stay tuned.
There's a couple coming. I can feel it. When I was in the corporate world for 10 years, which is kind of traumatic in and of itself, even just from a perspective of thinking about sitting in a gray cubicle with under fluorescent lights for most of your life. So that's traumatic, I think, to the human body. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. As
Yes.
a doctor?
Yes, I would.
Doctor, would you agree with this?
Yes, I would. That is unnatural.
And then when you add on, like, how many dysfunctional people on an emotional level are like in this, like, small little, like, feels like a rat cage. But I personally, when I went through grad school, I was already dealing with a lot of trauma in my personal life. Like, only a couple years before that, my parents, like, had a big house fire, and I lost everything from my childhood. And then the person I ended up marrying after this was in a DUI accident, almost killed himself, and was in ICU for like 10 days. And so I was in a state of trauma when I entered grad school, and I didn't know anything about trauma. So I was just like, I'm just going to keep going, because I was going to school doing my pre-med while I was doing full-time work. So I filled my days with nothing but work from sun up to sundown. Like, I didn't even have time to eat, really. I was like eating out of vending machines and stuff. It's not smart, but that's just what I was doing.
I get it.
So I was going through a lot of trauma, and then grad school just like kind of broke me. And then I was having a really hard time actually adjusting. So I was like learning all the things I was supposed to learn, like in my mind. Like, I could tell you if somebody can't, like the way they tested us. I would know in my mind what to do to someone's body, but I couldn't get my body to do it. And so I was really struggling, and I was having a hard time finding people to help me. This was before Kairos training culture even existed. And so it just got more and more and more traumatic. And then the other thing, for those of us who have had sexual trauma in our history, like having to touch each other like right away was very overwhelming for me. And I didn't really think about that.
Right.
Now that I'm looking back, I can see how it was just really just one thing after another, and then being touched by mostly males. Because when I was in school, I think the stats are way better now, and there's a lot more females. But when I was in school, it was 30% female and 70% male. And so it was just a lot to like always having people touching you all the time. And then I'm processing all this other trauma. having a hard time actually adjusting. And it makes sense to me now because my fascia was all locked up and I didn't have any freedom of movement in my body. And now that I have gone through some Kairos training culture, I have so much more respect for the athletic of it. Being somebody who wasn't super athletic, I'm like, that would have given me so much more permission to be like, okay, you either need to train more or find another way. And so I'm smart enough that I did find another way. I was very lucky to go through school with a woman who was also, because I was older than most people in school too when I was in school. And I went through school with another woman who was my age also. It's actually her birthday today. Shout out to Dr. Cherie Brown.
Oh, happy birthday.
She was a massage teacher before she went to chiropractic school. So she taught me how to do myofascial release.
Oh.
And I was like, well, I love doing this. It's slow, like there's a slowness to it. It's not like that thrust, that like the movement we have to make with our bodies as chiropractors. I was like, I don't have to do that. I can just like go with the wave of releasing fascia. And now I see it as the fascia got missed in chiropractic school, and it's the feminine part. It's the part that's it's all over our body. It needs a little bit slower motion. It needs more presence and attention sometimes. And so my sessions are a lot slower with people, and I spend more time with them. But and our traumas get stored in our fascia, and now there's a lot of evidence that backs this up. And so I just ended up learning. I just became really obsessed. And again, another part of my story, which is why I need to write a book, because there's so many layers here.
Yeah.
I've gotten migraines since I was a little kid, so. Getting adjusted all the time by people who are still learning just made them worse and worse and worse. And I really thought that I would go into school and learn about how to make myself better.
Right. One would think.
I really like fully assumed that that's what was going to happen. So it was really crushing when I was like, now I'm just getting worse. So then I just didn't ever want to do adjustments. And at that time, I felt like adjustments were violent. I don't think we should be doing it at all. I got kind of hard about that. And so I became obsessed with all the most gentlest ways of doing things. So I would take craniosacral classes, and I would take anything gentle. I was just like, anything that doesn't require like a hard force into the body, I wanted to learn how to do. And then I met Tammy Kent, who we've talked about her book last time. She's a physical therapist in Oregon, where I'm from, and she does this pelvic floor technique. And it includes physical myofascial release in the pelvic floor, but also includes like energy medicine. And it was just like right up my alley. So and I remember when I first met Tammy, I was like, I wish I would have just gone to PT school, because I would have just followed her path. And I was like, I just wish I wasn't a chiropractor. I don't even want the pressure of being a doctor. And she said, you're going to change your mind in about 10 years. She was totally right. So then that's when I just started learning pelvic floor work. But I was on my own, because I was a chiropractor doing pelvic floor work, learning from a PT. And I am from Oregon, where the scope of practice is the widest scope of practice for chiropractors. So it was totally fine for me to do it that way.
Sure.
But I still felt alone. Like I didn't know exactly how to do the notes for myself, and I didn't know exactly how to put it into a chiropractic context. And so little by little, I started learning from other people and started adding, like figuring out how this makes sense as a chiropractor. And then I met one chiropractic female, like maybe 5 years ago, or no, longer than that. It doesn't matter. And she's a pretty straight chiropractor. And she was like, it's really nice what you do, but it's not chiropractic. And in that moment, I was like, yes, it is. And I'm going to prove it. And
Something about challenge.
I know. I have a lot of Taurus energy in my chart. I can get very stubborn because I am a chiropractor and I am doing it. And all these muscles attach right to the inside of the sacrum and the tailbone at the very base of the spine. And 4 out of every 5 women have had sexual assault issues. A lot of women have like medical trauma, like even just going through a healthy birth is pretty traumatic to the body, let alone like when something goes wrong or there's intervention when you don't want it or you feel like you've lost your ground. Like there's a lot of issues that get really locked up in the pelvic fascia. And I noticed when I started adding adjustments back in, I might need to adjust somebody's sacrum over and over and over every week. And then when I addressed the fascia, I wouldn't need to do it every single week anymore. It would start to hold. And so I really started to have a lot of deep honor for the fascia needs to be addressed, especially in women. And since there's so much trauma being held in the female body and it stores in the fascia, we need more time and space and sacred space. And that's why I have my own space now, because I need like 4 walls and a ceiling and a door that can lock. And like, we need to be able to set up deeply sacred space and not be interrupted, and like be able to process whatever comes up, because it's these muscles down here are also a very emotional muscle group. So as you're working on them, there's sometimes like anger that comes up or tears that come up. And so I had to also get a lot of extra training in trauma, because those were the type of people that were coming to me. There's something natural about me that people feel safe. So then I started also learning a lot about trauma, how to deal with it, how to not like further traumatize people. We don't get any trauma in chiropractic training, and we really should learn more about it, because we put a lot of impulse into people's bodies, and sometimes when they're carrying around a lot of trauma, we can exacerbate it without even realizing that's what we're doing.
I mean, that last part, and just wanting to acknowledge, of course, your story as my university, I think it's like 50-50 as well, too. But I mean, there's so many aspects I want to explore, but what's most prominent right now is the prevalence of trauma as in reviewing a lot of chiropractic research and neuroscience, there's a lot of compilations and overlap with trauma, and how regular chiropractic care can actually help re-engage the prefrontal cortex and help us process things, continue to govern our emotions, stay in a conscious mindset, conceptualization, language, and a lot of different aspects and things. But they did a study out of the University Medical Center or portion of South Carolina, I believe, on a few thousand folk, and they found that 9 out of every 10 people experience a traumatic event in their life.
Yeah, well, because it's part of life.
Straight up.
Like Peter Levine's book, you read it, and it's all about how animals in nature they're dealing with literal life and death all the time.
All the time.
All the time. Like, oops, I almost just got eaten. But they don't hold on to it like we do.
They disperse it. They regulate it. They transform, I think, which is the main thing, which so many people, because there's an absence, I think, of space for emotional processing and a lack of awareness, intelligence, and strategy on how to process your emotions, I think then people just hold it or they repress it.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with me in my story, and being able, like, I just held it within me. And so many people just hold it within them in different aspects of their bodies. And I think what the beauty is that what you do is you allow for a space for things to be felt, things to be acknowledged. And then you give people strategy and direction on how to continue to move through it. And from a man's perspective, I find it so encouraging and important to be able to hold space for people that have been traumatized in general, but then of course women that have been traumatized. There's just a extra layer of intention, of reverence that there is to, wow, like I get to hold space for you as you're going through this transition, as you're processing what you are, as you're unraveling layers of yourself, as there's been emotional releases with chiropractic adjustments. But at the same time, I think the prerequisite for that is an intentionality. So if, practitioners of any field are listening to this, it is vitally important for you to have that awareness to craft a safer space if that is your intention for your practice members, especially if they're women.
Yeah, and there's a lot of little ways that we can inadvertently traumatize people in our role as provider, because there's like a power imbalance there too. So people look up to us and they're listening to us and they're coming to us when they're feeling sometimes at their lowest and they really need a lot of help. And so we have a certain amount of power. And so it's really important for us to recognize like little things that, and I can't even think of an example right now, but little things that we can say and the way we say it can just like hit people sometimes, where it's just like, ugh, and like sometimes we won't even really recognize that we're doing that. So we have to be very intentional with our words, with our actions. You talk about this a lot, like, how's your doctor taking care of themselves? Because if you're traumatized and you're not dealing with your trauma, you're not going to really be able to deeply hold space for people with theirs.
Yeah, it'll only be a super level or a superficial level of care. Like,
which can be kind of damaging for them too.
I think, where was it? Someone said somewhere, it was like, if you're not able to regulate yourself, or you're not to the degree that you haven't regulated yourself, well, then of course you're not going to be able to help one regulate themselves in that capacity. And there's so many nuances of that statement, but it's just so important, because to continue to, of course, do the work, but to just examine things, as I love how you referenced nature, as I think it's an example in the book, like lion cubs like almost got eaten by like a certain predator, and they ran up the tree, and then they played afterwards to disperse the energy, to move the energy. And then they were running like scenarios like, well, if you revisited this again, well, this is what we would do. Of course, without saying like communicating with words, but that's what they were doing. And I think when you're working, from what I observe, when you're working with women, you're giving them an opportunity to once more face things and then be able to, talk to them and help them integrate it if they were to go back into a situation like that, or maybe they're currently living within that situation. At least they have more space available within themselves to not just default to that flight, fight, or freeze response or mechanism, but instead they're able to be more grounded because they're more rooted in themselves versus just being activated or blown out once more.
Yeah, a lot of women are really numb from the waist down, so they've like numbed it out. And then other times it's really super activated, so there's a lot of like pain and tension that just they can't like get rid of. So it usually tends to go one way or the other.
Please share more on that. As when I hear that, I hear disassociation.
Yeah,
like a lot of women disassociate from their bodies. I think one of my clients, she just sent me a message that she was just getting some Reiki done, and her knee was bothering her and has been bothering her, and that's because she was disassociating from her body, and she had an unhealthy relationship with the masculine.
Yeah.
And it was an invitation for her to be able to focus and be able to put energy towards that and clear that energetically.
Yeah. So there's a few different things that happen in our bodies when there's been trauma, and dissociation is a big one. And then another one is just like it just kind of locks up. So especially women that have had sexual trauma or their early childhoods were really tumultuous. A lot of times I've noticed a pattern of just those muscles are holding so much tension that they just can't release. And then that ends up just locking the whole thing down. Like some women get to a point where their pelvic floor muscles are so tense that you couldn't even put like a Q-tip in. And that, like the female pelvis is supposed to be able to stretch enough to let a baby out. So like a Q-tip should be nothing.
Right.
But it just will hold so much tension out of like protection in a lot of times. But the other beautiful thing is, one of the things I've learned is like we are so resilient. Like we are so resilient, and nature shows us that. We have the same capacity as animals do to heal and to like let it go, and we just need time and space. Like we don't really honor females in our culture. And so that's a big part of the problem. We don't have community space really to process these things. I think we're starting to, and you see it, like we've seen examples in our own community. I won't really get into it, but what happens when you believe women and how quickly they can heal from something pretty intense.
How quickly they can heal.
Especially when there's like a whole lot of people rallying for you and not like questioning you and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of layers to this. But the most important thing is that I would say from my work is that we need like these muscles and this fascia in our pelvis, it needs touch and presence. And a lot of people are kind of afraid to go there because it's pelvic floor. So it's just like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble or whatever. I don't want to cause any damage. But the truth is like we need touch and presence, especially from other females. So like I'm only teaching other females how to do female pelvic floor work in this moment.
Makes sense.
I might like consider changing that a little bit in the future, like later on. But for now, it's like it's women's work. It's for women, by women. And there's just like, it's so much healing. It's really so beautiful, like how quickly women will blossom and just let things go when they feel permission to feel their feelings and to be seen.
What's up, people? If you've been digging and enjoying this episode of Soul Coffee, or you've just been around for a minute, we got something for you, as it feels good to be able to share with y'all Chasing Your Own Personal Legend video modules with me and Lou, as we've really been holding on to these things, and it feels good to be able to offer to you. If you've been listening, we'll happily give you 50% off. We'll make a nice sexy promo code. Details will be in the show notes, so pay attention to that, as we're only going to make it active for about a month or so. So if you want to go deeper, if you need help in navigating the chaos, the energy, all the things with life, we want to be able to offer that to you, so that way you can get charged up, go deeper, get some needs met, as it feels good to be able to share that with the community. Now back to the show. I was actually on the phone with my sister earlier, and she said, she just reflected like she could just hear a lot of birds, and did you know that birds only sing when they feel safe?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
was like, and it's simple. And I think of this body as an instrument, and we can only sing our songs when we can feel safe in that realm. And I really love that last line. It's for women, made by women.
Yes.
It's like through other women. That's
Yes.
very. It's a special space when, you know, there's women's circles or there's men's circles, but of those specific, it just, as you've seen with your women's circles as well, you know, even people that have seen you or haven't seen you, you know, there's some magic that happens. Would you care to share more on that? What you've seen in those circles?
There's so many women that suffer in silence, and then they feel like they're alone. And because a lot of these issues in the pelvic floor are taboo to talk about, people don't talk about it.
Ooh.
And so when you put women in a room together and you create a safe space for them to start sharing, they'll start sharing, and then they start realizing they're not alone, and then more people start sharing. And a lot of times, like, there will be a lot of tears. And sometimes we need to scream to like let some of that out, but then like there's just so much clearing that happens after that. And so then like there's just such a quick move to like, oh, I'm really not alone. Like, it's actually an epidemic. If you want to talk about a real pandemic, it's like what female bodies are going through and have been for hundreds of years. But we're healing it now. Like, now's the time, and we're not going back. So we're going to heal. We're going to move forward. And we need to, sometimes we really do. I think there's value in doing co-ed work too, but there's also value in like being with the group that you're in, because then you could just go there and you just really deeply understand. So like I've had circles where men have showed up, but what happens with women is we're so conditioned to caretake for the men that they'll end up getting all the attention. And it's like, it just happens really naturally. And then we're just, that's kind of how we are. We want to make sure you're okay, because like, that's just how we are, generally speaking. And so it's really important for women, just like I'm sure it's important as a person of color to sometimes be around just other people of color. So you can just be like, can I talk straight with you? You know, I just want to not have to be like, if somebody come through and be like, well, did you think about, you know, it wasn't, you know, not all white people or whatever. It's like, no, I'm experiencing this and I don't want to have to
Put a layer
Yeah,
of it.
I don't want to have to protect your feelings. I just want to be able to talk
Fuck,
about
man. Let's talk about these white people. No.
it. Like, we can go there too. I'm cool with that. I've done a lot of my own work.
Yeah, you are. And Dr. Danielle's a fierce advocate in all realms, shapes, and forms, and just something about that element of like community or it's even just the realization that, wow, I'm not alone.
Yeah, it's very universal. I'm not alone, and then we can carry each other, and it's beautiful because you'll see one woman like giving this woman advice that she never saw, or it's just like holding space for her, giving each other tissues and hugging, and it's like there's something that we're all just like, yeah, I get that, like I get that.
Yeah, I get that. As I love the concept, you know, we can carry each other, we can hold each other.
Yeah,
And that's, I can't even put words to describe how sacred that is to be able to bring back, as I think the world in this moment, like there's so many people being traumatized, like I referenced in the past, like 9 out of 10 sexual abuse and domestic abuse were the vast majority of people.
a lot of broken humans out there.
Yeah, that think that they can't heal or once more that they're by themselves. So when a human being, I think, realizes that they're not alone, I think it just it deactivates or brings them back into a parasympathetic space where they can process, they can cry, they can take off their armor, they can put down their weapon, they can actually be able to actually breathe and breathe into their pelvic floor and be able to actually feel a lot of the feelings that they didn't know how to navigate or they didn't know what to do with. I think one of the most powerful, humbling experiences was at Soul Revival this last weekend, which feels like it was forever ago already, which is nuts.
I know.
That's nuts. Where 80 to 85% of the people there were women. And when one of our community members, you know, was sharing what she had been through and been traumatized with sexually, there is an opportunity for the men to be able to give reverence to the women and let them know that we bow, you know, facilitated by Dr. Brett. And the presence, first and foremost, from my experience as a man, witnessing that, the presence alone of the amount of women that were up there, I have deep reverence for what I've been through as a man, experiencing my own sexual abuse, but then having an awareness of what my family has been through, what my mom has been through, what my grandma has been through, and seeing that in another body just really it's just so, it goes beyond anything. It's very primordial. It's very primal to be able to just hold reverence and stake in that as we had to bow, or we got to bow, excuse me. And I was just, my head was just through the floor. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, whatever you need. I'm here for it. Then coming up to the standing position, I went to go pick up my head, and I couldn't, I went to go pick my head. I really couldn't, because I felt the acceptance of the weight and the energy as that was happening. There was women that were bellowing and wailing and just releasing, and I'm getting chills as I'm talking about this. It's like a popcorn effect of non-conscious and conscious release.
Yeah.
And you could hear the non-conscious release of it, because you could feel how repressed it was, or how long it was held, or how much longing there was for it to be acknowledged. And that was the first space where so many people were able to just let go. And then when I actually picked my head up and I looked at Janeth, I looked at my friend Ariana, I looked at my friend Patricia, it was just a very primal acknowledgement of being able to see a human for what they have been through and what they've held, and just to be really, really present to that. And it just transformed and added another layer. And I think it's very poetic that we get to have this conversation on for me, it's like, okay, now how can I not necessarily replicate that, but how can I walk with that space available inside myself, so that way I can bring that to my practice members and create other spaces where I can just let them know, like, I see you for all that you've been through, and whether or not I've experienced the same thing, because you had to navigate from a space of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological harm. I see you for that, and I'm here to help be a bridge into being more so at home within yourself.
Yeah. I think the best thing you can do as a male provider is continue to do your own emotional work. Like, the worst thing our culture's ever done was teach little boys to not cry. And then our society also teaches girls to not feel anger. So only males are allowed to feel anger, and only females are allowed to cry. That's stupid. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
We're human beings, and we run the gamut of emotions. We can't actually, it's just like, it's part of information. It's part of processing. It's just part of being human. And so it's really, really important. This is why men's groups are important, to like learn, like, it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. And the more you feel it, the less it's like in you being stuck. And then you can hold more space and you're not getting triggered. That's the biggest thing. And then it just gets easier and easier. Like, at that moment, I could feel all the emotion, and I've been holding space, deep space for women for more than a decade. So it doesn't usually catch me, but it almost got me. Like Dr. Brett, he almost got me. He almost got me, but not totally, because I was holding space too. And I've worked through a lot of this. And so, but it's like, part of it was just like allowing everyone to be feeling what they're feeling in that moment. Just like really allow it. That's where the healing was, more than anything else. Like, to look at it. Don't be afraid to look at it. Don't be afraid to feel it.
Don't be afraid to look at it.
We need to take these things out of the shadows and like look. I'm a proponent of looking at something directly. I think that's the only way through. That's why I'm not afraid to talk about racism. I'm not afraid to talk about any of it, because it's like, it's real. Like, the only way through is like, let's just be honest about it. The impacts it's had, how it's like layered into people over time, how it fits into our epigenetics. You could say the same thing about what women have gone through. So a lot of us, we can get triggered so easily, but we really need to learn how to process our own emotions, so we're not getting so triggered, so that we can actually look at everything for what it is, so we can fix it and go back into harmony.
It's such a simple such a simple concept, yet it's so hard. Like, it's so difficult for people, and I can appreciate the conditioning from when I was younger, because I'm Black and Latino. Like, definitely crying wasn't an option.
Yeah.
And then the component of women not being able to express anger. But, beyond the conditioning when we were younger, what do you think in this day and age really just perpetuates that difficulty of processing something that we were built to?
I think we think too much, and we're in our heads too much, and we're looking at screens too much, and we're listening to other people too much. And we're giving our power away too much.
We're looking outside too much.
We're looking outside too much. We really just need to feel our feelings. And if it's too hard, get help.
I got a question for you. What do you think the difference is between emotions and feelings? As I've been grappling with this, as emotions for me are they're just the biochemistry of what can come up immediately.
Yeah.
What about for you?
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't really delineate too much other than like if you wanted to get really specific about it, feeling could be more into like actual sensation. Like what you're actually feeling. What does sadness feel like? So sadness is the emotion, but what does it feel like? What's the sensation of it? And that's how you work through trauma, is like focusing on the sensation more than like, where did this trauma come from? How do I fix it? What's the next logical step? Da, 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 da. And actually, what's this feeling that I'm having, and where can I locate it in my body? And does it have a texture? And does it have a shape? And like really getting it. That's how you kind of clear those emotions out of your body.
The sense-scape.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite words that Dr. Lance talks on. As that makes sense. You get a biochemical charge. It's like, okay, now how is my matter animating? Where am I feeling this? What's the temperature? What's changing? What are the thoughts that come up? It's really able to add context, which then bridges into neuroscience with Dr. Caroline Leaf as she goes through the neurocycle, which is like, take inventory, become aware of things. Then now let's what's coming up for you, where are things at. So it's really starting to conceptualize these different emotions, but now it's starting to, I don't want to say put a finiteness to them, but you're able to actually start to grasp and put some texture and put some awareness to what am I experiencing truly. So that way it puts a cap to it. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, when I feel sadness, I in the past had felt this, these thoughts came up, this came up, this came up, this came up. Okay, cool. Now, well, where do I want to redirect this energy? What do I want to feel? How do I want to apply this? What conversations do I need to have? Then it puts a very solid path to, okay, this and then now this. So that people can now have a roadmap to be able to feel their feelings and be able to perhaps, then reference the legacy or reference, the past feelings that they felt and have conquered, and that way, because it can lead to new adaptations of things.
Yeah, and if we're not doing that work, I feel like emotions come to us because it's information in the moment. Yeah. Like it's supposed to be in the moment, but then we're like, oh, I'm not supposed to be feeling that feeling, so I'm going to shove it down. And then like you never process it, so then it just gets stuck somewhere. And then the next time you feel a feeling, you're like, oh shit, I'm not supposed to feel that feeling either. Shove that down. And then you're just walking around. You can see it in people's posture and their stiffness. They're just like, this is like, they're just filled with all these emotions that they're afraid to feel.
All that baggage.
Yeah. And so then it's hard at first if you've been doing this your whole life and you've got 40 years of, I haven't felt any of my feelings. So at first it's really fucking hard because then you have this avalanche and it feels like it's never going to end, but it does, because you just got to take the time to work through all that and just like, be really kind to yourself and like, okay, so I've ignored you, body, and my emotions for however many years. It's going to take some time to actually process through all this. And that's when it's helpful to get help from whoever you feel like is helpful for you. For some people it's therapy, for other people it's body work, for some people it's both. Some people just need to like take time and space for themselves to process it. Everyone's a little different. But you got to do the work. Like you can't really avoid it.
You can until you can't.
Yeah, exactly. It'll hit you at some point.
It'll put your ass down.
Yes. Especially if you wait till midlife or later to deal with it, then it's really hard. Really, really extra hard.
Which I think that's the generation above me, quote unquote, came before me, your generation and beyond. This work didn't, quite literally, the work that you're birthing, bringing into the world, it didn't exist.
No.
But like having a conversation like with my grandfathers, or even it's new with my dad, but forget about it. Like that's so much emotion, and those are the seeds, or that was the bed in which a lot of people didn't express a lot of different things, and that was the standard. So it's just now these last few generations, there's so much freedom, and the Gen or whatever, Alpha, whatever Liv tells me, they're so much more aware and they have so much more access to these different concepts. Then it's a matter of navigating the sea of information, because now there's so much and we have so much access to so much. While previously it was more so just being really present to life and then not feeling those things. So they now, I think, some of the mastery and the opportunity with the generations now is, yes, there is this sea of emotions or information, but then there's also all the emotions that you're experiencing. So it's like a full, complete picture of the totality of life in this moment. merge the two together, well, I think a component to it is just continue to learn how to master it all and then be able to discern, be able to step away and be able to connect to nature. But when
Discernment's really important, and the powers that be that don't want us to have any of our, like, any real freedom, or they don't want us to feel. So now that it's so easy to like send all this information to us, and there's propaganda coming from every corner that gets people riled up, but also keeps us away from nature and our own feelings to process what we're feeling.
keeps us away.
And so people are getting riled up without even having any discernment or understanding, is this even true? Like, how many people stop and say, instead of being like, oh, I'm fired up because of this thing I just saw on Instagram, and did they ask, is this even true? Maybe I should go into nature and like feel my feelings before I'm laughing at myself because sometimes I don't do this, before I go like argue with strangers on the internet.
And that's a trap. That's why it's a skill.
Yeah. It's like, that's why the balance is really important, because like when the internet, and I'm old enough to have like watched all of this happen. So when the internet first came along, it was just this huge awakening in our minds, because we were able to access so much information. And then there was more and more and more and more. So we were able to connect with each other more. We were able to like learn more things. But now it's just like so big and it's hard to discern. And I'm actually pretty good at it, because I have a lot of background. I was a data analyst before I went to chiropractic school. So I used to make databases and things like that. So I actually am pretty good at like data. And there's always been something in me that's pretty good at like sniffing out bullshit, but it's getting harder and harder and harder to do that. I'll catch myself sometimes where I'm just like, I'll fully believe something, and then when I actually go do the research, I'm just like, oh, I was wrong. And I don't think we're taught discernment, and we're definitely not taught how to listen to the discernment of within our own bodies. And so there's this like happy medium that we need to find. Like, it's okay to use technology. What are we going to do? Like, stop using computers? Are we going to take it all the way back and stop driving and stop all the technology we've created over the last 200 years or so? Like, we're currently dealing with the repercussions of the technology we started 200 years ago, because we started with the Industrial Revolution, started like mass producing things, and now we're really out of alignment with nature. And we're all stressed out about AI, but we haven't even dealt with the repercussions of what we created 200 years ago. So we just kind of have to learn too how to like take breaks from it all and like actually be in our bodies and listen to what our body says, because my body's like will pretty clearly tell me yes or no about certain things, but it's easy to bypass also.
If this is something or somewhere new for people learning how to feel their feelings or, listen to their body, what would you say, what's one or two basic steps where people can start?
Breath. Like, just really start with your breath, and sensation. So we have to take enough time away from our devices so that we're not in our head so much, and actually learn how to feel into our bodies. And that takes time and practice. And so creating space for that. I tell people, like, even if you create 5 minutes a day, I would rather people do 5 minutes a day of like intentional work with your body and your feelings than like 1 hour once a week. Because it just sets up the routine and like the pattern and the everyday, and then your body starts getting used to it, and then you can do it faster in less time. But if you're only doing like 1 hour once a week, it's just going to take forever.
That makes so much sense.
So like, even if you can carve out 5 minutes every single day, or most days, and just like listen to your body. And at first, you're just like, I don't know, it just feels like chaos, and that's fine. Just breathe into the chaos and let it be there. And then just listen to it, and then that'll kind of disperse it. I think moving too is really like, people just, and I'm not athletic, but I still move around. So it's really important to move around, or to put on some music and just like dance around so that you can discharge some stuff. Get outside in nature, put your feet in the dirt, get in some water, like be in the elements, and like feel the sensation of it. Feel your feet and your toes, like feel all the way down. Like, if you were to, most people, if you ask them to stop, close your eyes and feel your body, what do you feel? And most people feel their heads. But do you feel your toes? Like, it's quite literally feeling is the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just playing a little game, like ping-ponging my awareness, like all throughout the body. That was one of the exercises in Waking the Tiger, which really surprised me. I was like, wow, like I actually haven't felt the weight of my legs today.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's those little things. That's why it's so easy to skip over. Or like if you feel really charged and anxious, like there's little tricks, like find 5 things that are red in this room. And then your eyes are just kind of looking around for the red things, and it's crazy how much it calms you down.
It's like the input is like, find this, and then the body's like, okay, and then you find it. So it's like, then it's like, okay, check.
Yeah.
It's really taking inventory of like what's available to us, and I think that there's so much juice in life and awareness as we slow down and take inventory and see how far these bodies have traveled, and really unwind things. I just think a lot of people just don't take the time to do that.
No, and like our minds move so much faster than our bodies do. And so now that we're at the speed of, like, we're just at this crazy speed with all the information, we haven't had time. We haven't really been able to catch up with what we know.
Or what we've been exposed to, what we've been gifted. Like, there's so much we can do right now with what we have already.
I know. It's kind of sad. But even, like, think about epigenetics. We didn't really even barely know about that 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Right.
And the repercussions of that are massive. To understand, like, how memory and, like, trauma is passed down through the generations, it's literally in our cells. Like, we know this with science. Like, we know it as a fact now. But, like, the implications of, like, people, I think, would be so much more compassionate with each other if we really stopped for a second to think, like, oh, these traumas really did get passed down for probably the last at least 7 generations.
Man.
That's a lot to deal with.
It's like 500 years.
Yeah.
Or at least a few hundred years.
Yeah, it's a lot of weight on this generation now that finally has time to process a lot of this stuff. And so people get really impatient because they don't like how it makes them feel. And so if we get better at, like, oh, wow, I'm feeling really uncomfortable. Okay, that's okay. Instead of like, oh, I feel really uncomfortable, so I need to shut all this down. I can't even talk about it. I can't look at it. Then we'll have more compassion. But you have to have compassion for yourself before you can have compassion for everyone else. So it always goes back to give yourself loving compassion, feel your feelings. You're a human being. Then I think we'll get somewhere as a culture. And we're totally capable of it. We just need to, like, get out of our own way.
Man, I appreciate the invitation, and I'm really excited for, healthcare professionals to be able to bear witness to you and, the work that you're doing, and then your first class. Like,
yeah.
Oh my God, tell me some details about that.
We're gonna launch in June, so I'm, like, literally working on the website right now. So it should launch in the next couple of days from today, which is May something, 5th, 6th. 5th, yeah. So I'm just really excited because I was, like, kind of ready to leave chiropractic. And then I just decided to stay, and then it just opened up a huge world for me. And now I only want to teach chiropractor females how to do pelvic floor work. Because, like, the PT world does do a lot of it, but we are kind of similar, but we're also really different.
Yes.
And there's, like, a different way that chiropractors express. There's a different lineage that we come from. It serves a different population of people. And I really believe, because my teacher was kind of a renegade in her field by doing the spiritual and energy work, which I feel like is very natural to chiropractic, or at least in our roots. And so I feel like we are really well primed to help people. 1 in 4 women have pelvic floor issues. That's the latest statistic. I think it's probably even more than that. So there's a huge need. And the work itself is pretty simple. You just need to know how to hold space, and you have to have done your own work. So I've created what I wish was available for me when I had to figure all this out on my own. So I've created a really robust program that's going to really hold the women who are learning this work, and it'll actually allow them to get a lot of high touch. It's not like I'm going to record a bunch of lectures and make you listen to it for your CE. No, I've created a very high touch program with high standards. We're going to do a lot of our own implementation research. So the people that I'm attracting into my group, I want people to, like, be part of this movement with me within chiropractic and really, like, deeply support women. And I want to, like, really deeply support the women who are supporting the women. And I've like built in ways to create case studies. I've built in ways to like for all of us to actually track the data that we're all getting, so that 10, 15 years from now, we can say we've treated tens of thousands of women.
Man.
These are the patterns that we see.
Man.
So I'm like really able to integrate right now the part of me that was a data analyst before I even did this, the part of me that was a designer, and I'm creating a lot of beautiful materials. I'm really creating a deep structure that isn't necessarily like me at the top with a hierarchy, but it's going to be, I'm going to really empower the women working with me to go take this and like put their own stamp on it and move forward with it. So I'm actually just really deeply excited to bring the legitimacy of this type of work to more people and to really empower chiropractic females to support women in like such deep ways. Because there's so much that we can do before women have to take meds or like surgeries that can sometimes cause a lot more problems for them. Not always. Sometimes that's a solution that they need, but it shouldn't be the first place that we go. And so there's so much that we can do to support women in a beautiful, easy, sustainable way. And I'm just really excited. And I've been deeply calling in like the right people, the souls, like I can feel them already coming in who are like supposed to like root this down with me. And I'm just really excited about it.
Me too. I'm excited to see the wave.
Yeah.
Like the wave of things evolving and opening up. And yeah, I'm just so excited as it's like, oh, how feminine of you. You don't want a hierarchy. Wow.
I know.
Wow.
I like to take things all the way. And I think there's time and place for that.
Yeah.
It's just for this, it's just not what's being called for in this moment.
I love it. So who's it for? It sounds like the female chiropractor.
Any female chiropractor. We want to start the first cohort with people who are like hopefully for the most part licensed already and in practice.
Yep.
But then I'll open it up probably to students, and like I might case by case basis let some students in now.
Sure.
And then I can see myself opening it up to like CAs and things like that, because there's actually a lot that CAs can do in this work too, because we're not doing high velocity adjusting. It's fascial work, so there's a lot that they can do to support and actually really like be more than like admin assistants and things like that. Like I'm starting to really see how we can like make this thing even bigger. But for now, it's for chiropractic females who are interested in helping women with pelvic floor issues.
Sounds great. Yeah, I really look forward to calling those women in. And, you know, how can people reach out to you and how can people find you now that you got all these nice updates?
Yeah, you can go to gynochiropractic.com to find the latest on the training itself. And you can find me at drdaniellecornelius.com.
I love it. Oh,
Yeah.
This is so good. You're definitely exuding that soul coffee flavor. Bold and strong.
Yes, it is bold. Yes.
Necessarily.
Yes.
Yes. And if you could leave our listeners with any nuggets, wisdom, what would it be?
What's coming in right now is just like learning to listen to your body. Like my tagline has always been practicing the art of deep listening. Learning to listen to and honor and have compassion for your own body is like, that's like the portal to what we need for healing for the whole community.
I see that. Oh, so we can heal individually and together, and then as a collective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just see, something like that happened last weekend. Like, what would that look like if that was happening once a week? Just deep acknowledgement and all different ways, shapes, and forms. But oh my goodness. Well, y'all, please give her a follow, shoot her a message, ask any questions, go on her website, apply for her program. Super, super excited to just celebrate and see how chiropractic is going to shift, how healthcare is going to shift, how life is going to shift, how communities are going to shift, and what's to come for our women, what's to come for the expression in healthcare. As I think there's going to be a lot of eyes and excitement that is going to come with this, as it's such a novel and exciting and inspiring idea that's so important. So it feels really good. But y'all, please hit up Dr. Danielle Cornelius, and if this resonated with you, or if the concepts are new and they're charging to you, share it with a friend. Please leave a 5-star review. I appreciate everyone that's been doing so, as it's been nice. As fun fact, Soul Coffee is in the top 2.5% of all podcasts out there. which puts it in like the top 75,000. Hey, and that's okay. We'll keep chipping away.
Way to go.
We'll just keep staying consistent. Olivia's been a great ally in steering me to keep things consistent as well too. So shout out to Olivia, my personal strategist, Lou, my marketing team, Christina, my communications team, as I am because we are, and may the world be able to feel more of that.
Yes, please.
Until next time, y'all. Peace.